I
All right.
mean,
So, welcome. This is our late live, not live upload of our intentional live.
we tried.
we're all enjoying tea, crumpets, whatever, and talking about behavior
Biscuits.
analysis. Biscuits. I think the topic, we've tried this a number of times. The topic is going to be pitched by Rebecca. I guess context of our discussion today. So go for it.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, key point, what it boils down to, I want to know what every single person in this field is doing to respond to the crisis that we are experiencing in the world, not just from COVID, but climate and everything else, and how we're actually going to take this opportunity to change the way that we approach things, and what the field needs to do in response
I
to
think every
the need.
industry is thinking that right now, a little bit to some
Yeah,
degree,
well, and
right?
so what I find myself getting real irritated about is just every single thing is, how do we adjust to telehealth? Okay, great. Like, yeah, we need to do that. Fine. But more broadly, what what is the overall field going to look like beyond that? And one of these days, our services, as we're applying them predominantly now, are going to be irrelevant when we have people who don't have food or don't have livable, habitable environment. So yeah, let's shift to telehealth. Let's shift, all of this. This isn't going to be the last virus. We do need to make adjustments. It might try to go back to normal for a little while, but this isn't the end of this. And how can we be more efficient and effective with our services so that more of us can go out and integrate with other people who are involved in things like agriculture and climate science and politics and everything else that we really need to be involved in to really make a change in this world? Because what's the point? I don't want to go back to busting my butt 50, 60 hours a week. For who? For what? To get by? No, I want to live my life. So yeah, sorry.
I
feel you.
I
Feel your energy.
this question is like, I've been having conversations about this question almost on the daily. So with people who are social worker, working in various kinds of fields, automotive industry, and a lot of it is like, have basically, I mean, what we basically have is the equivalent of like neo-corporatist authoritarian or like indentured servitude, where only instead of living on the turn of the century where people were like getting paid in their company's money to spend their dole at the company store, as Woody Guthrie would have put it. They now get enough money to live what's called a middle-class lifestyle, despite the fact that they're mired in debt, and they are satiated in such a way where like there's not enough MO in place, or there's not enough EOs in place to spark rebellious behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
and not like pitchforks and
yeah.
I'm not talking and guillotines, even though that's not necessarily the worst idea in some instances.
Right.
But I mean, like,
failure to
but I mean, just like generally, like asserting our rights and our values as
refusal to
people
participate
who are
anymore.
in that level. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And also, like, on the inverse of that, like wanting now, having this moment where like it's awakened your soul a little bit, and it's like, wait a second, I've been busting my ass doing what's called the American dream. I've been busting my ass. I go to work every day. I pay taxes. I got an education. I'm a law-abiding citizen. You know what I mean? I take care of my lawn. I'm kind to my neighbors. And then the second, something happens, I'm disposable.
What are you doing
like
for
that.
me? Yeah.
Where?
What am I paying into? What am I buying into?
And it seems to be that we've been kind of like swayed, especially in our profession, that like, you have to get an advanced education, and the remuneration is acceptable, but it's not amazing. It's not doctor money like we were talking about before. And like a lot of that is usually cited as like, well, think of the work you're doing and think of the good and the satisfaction that you get and just the amazing good feels that you get from it. And it's like the good feels don't pay the bills. And when it boils down to it, the way that the system's set up, I don't know if the amount of change that we're actually creating or generating is substantive enough to validate or to justify
No,
what's
honestly,
been
what we're
happening. So
doing,
that's really what you're saying, I think. Yeah.
yeah, what we're doing is we're helping more people participate in the bullshit.
An
That's all we're
admired
doing.
system, yes.
Yeah,
Can you
that's all we're
define the
doing.
bullshit a little bit more? Can we like outline what those are?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, a lot of what we just said. So we, like Dimitri was saying, we have worked hard. We've paid in to government, wherever we are. I mean, yeah, this conversation is going to be weighted a little heavily on the US because that's my experience, but US isn't the only one not responding appropriately to this outbreak. People are participating, doing what it is that we've been told we're supposed to do, and yeah, this circumstance comes up, and
To me, honestly, the bullshit is participating and perpetuating a system that maximizes profits over producing meaningful outcomes.
And at the same time, is literally destroying the world.
Yeah. So like for me, those are definitely problematic. And I feel like now this has got the potential to turn a bitch session. I don't want that to happen. So
I would like to
save
get
it from falling off the rails like that. But I mean, so it's like really like what can we do? Like if we read something like The Nurture Effect, and Nikki, thanks for sending that to me. I've actually read The Nurture Effect. I love Bidwin. I think he's a little too rosy sometimes as far as like what the realities of the world are. But I definitely think that what he offers in terms of like an idealized system makes sense. Or at least an idealized perspective makes sense. Like if we can have works like The Nurture Effect that describe a kind of world that incorporates behavioral principles in such a way as to produce higher levels of happiness, what are we actually doing to propel that idea forward other than just participating in a bill and kill system of providing developmental disability services or autism services? Like, and are we doing that in that little niche? And the always follow-up question to that, which I think is the reasonable one, is how do you make a living doing something otherwise? And also, how do you generate or create ways to actually participate in those other areas or arenas?
Yeah. Well, and
those are a couple of the questions that I think
I was going to say the reason I was asking for that clarification is just that I don't think any of these are coming from an inadequate place. Like y'all are tackling very important things here. For me, I guess I've gotten to the point where it's like, yeah, systems and things are really poorly designed. It's accepting that and then realizing like how I can fit within that system, or if I want to rebuild something, right? And the realities even of that, of like, what can you rebuild? Like, I can't rebuild a society.
Yeah.
Like, I could play a role in that, right? And we've kind of talked about that in various ways with the pro-sociality and like other things that we've kind of learned from our field. But for me, I guess I've in a way accepted the defeat of some of these larger systems, and I didn't used to feel that way, but that leads me to then, okay, like what impact can I have? I just kind of been comfortable with that. But I that is clearly not a solution for the larger issues.
And that's where I feel we're at now. Like I have gone through my varying phases of, just allowing myself to be part of it. And okay, well, so how do I fit into the system? How do I do? But like, oh, it's not going to be enough. We're running out of time to save. Like, are we going to save humanity on this planet?
I think if we're gonna like talk legitimate ways that what we all need to do, I think it does kind of become a philosophical conversation, because I think it becomes like everyone needs to look in the mirror and say, am I living in accordance with my values? Like, am I living in accordance with something that I believe in and want to change too? Like, am I actually, not to get cheesy about it, but am I the change I want to see in the world, right? And ask those fundamental questions. And I think like I've had to go through that. No, go ahead, please.
I think we have to be okay with the fact that some people's values don't line up with what we think is going to save the world.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah. Well, and so what my frustration comes in too is that I know there are other people who feel this way and other people who are out there. And where's the connection? How do we build something up? How do we get connected with the people who do want to do that? Because I go and I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go get into politics or I'll go do this. And I start looking up the job descriptions and I don't have that degree and I don't,
I
fit
really
into
think
that. And
this is where my motivation to get into school and research came into play, because I think that's one way to connect with other people who are trying to have an impact on a larger scale as they're doing the research and they're building connections between fields.
yeah, well, it needs to be more broadly disseminated for the rest of us. Like we as clinicians, we as trained people with this energy to go out there and do things need to be able to find
But
who
isn't,
is
I
doing
think
what.
too, I think some stuff is out there. I think a lot of people in our field just don't want to
It
read
needs to
that stuff.
be, well, yeah, and it needs to be organized though. And same thing, like, yeah, I know there's the SIGs and there's the whatever. And so I was sitting here getting real pissed off at the lack of knowing what's going on. So I started reading, okay, well, who's going to be at ABAI? And then I see these things and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. But you know what? I don't have $800 or whatever the heck it is to go to ABAI. Like, is that the only, like there needs to be some, and we've talked about this before a little bit, you guys have talked about it, like having some sort of coordinated, organized, connected systems, a better way to find the other people who want to do this.
We'll be meeting on Sunday about this.
and the internet, I think, is
Yeah.
my only
Yeah.
just like
Oh, I was gonna say the Do Better movement really helped me find a lot of people who are in the same, like, who really want to make a difference and make change in our field, like Megan Miller's thing.
Yeah, no, I'm part of that.
yeah.
And that all goes
like
back to the
that one.
autism services. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. But I'm talking about there's not going to be autism services if people run out of food and the earth is uninhabitable and like what.
Well, that's
Yeah, well,
that just goes into.
I think those sort of doomsday things aren't going to happen.
Not right away.
Wrong about this. I don't think they're gonna. Well, I think they're gonna. I think you're gonna see pressures and issues from like global warming and stuff down the road. But I think like the current situation, it'll only get so bad to the point. This is fucked up, but I think it's gonna get bad enough to where we start to put a more public price on a life, and then we start to reopen things. That's unfortunately what I think is gonna happen. We already do this in other areas when it comes to figuring out. Like through insurance, there's a price on everybody's back or head when you're signing up.
Yeah,
for
they're called
insurance, right?
actuarial tables.
Yeah, they're all there. It's just not a publicly known thing. So like, I think what will happen is things will unfortunately definitely get worse with people that are in the lowest, hardest to hit areas. And then that just creates more and more pressure to do things. But like, at a certain point, they're going to like, okay, this is not worth it. Turn things back on. And this is what happens. Right. And it might be an uprising and that sort of sense, but that's my prediction. I think it could be like, it's obviously a fucking prediction, but like, I don't see those things happening. If anything, I feel like this is just a glimpse of like the issues that'll come with the global warming and stuff. And we can't pause and turn those things around quickly. Right. And so there's a really good argument, I think, for how this might be just a drop in the bucket of what we might experience down the road.
This is definitely a drop in the bucket. Are you kidding me?
For the practical side of like how to help, it seems like humans have to experience direct acting contingencies more than rule governed behavior, unfortunately. And then from there, it's like also realizing that nothing's operating in a vacuum. We know this in behavior and how things influence, but like, unfortunately, you have to fit it within the capitalistic framework, the economic, right? Like you gotta like, that's the only way these situations work. And I think that's where a lot of behavior analysts or behavior analytic organizations, there's great exemplars out there, but for the most part, like we aren't taught, hey, all this operates in this larger context. And so that just, I think, brings the conversation about what variables do come into play and what can you affect. And that's where I've liked Biglin and them. Like they realize that it's a much larger game and scale. Whereas what we've been primarily pumping into the industry is a bunch of behavior analysts that are like, hey, you can go make 6 figures, you can deliver this autism therapy. That's what behavior analysis is. And it's like that reality is now becoming a reality for everybody else through these direct acting contingencies.
So here's what I want to say to that. I want to say that I've come to the realization in the last couple weeks actually I've been doing this research project on something called the over-justification effect, and I've been reading a lot about it. And it's this like really common thing in education circles and psychology circles that is based on the notion that external rewards decrease called intrinsic motivation. Now, when we as behavior analysts hear those phrases, number one, we think absurd. But number two, we think, what the fuck does intrinsic like that's not like, how do you even start talking about intrinsic motivation and having things decrease relative to it? But then if you look at what how intrinsic motivation is operationalized in that literature, what they're saying is the incentive to engage in preferred activities decreases relative to someone else coming in and applying contingencies on a thing. So now, again, the data still doesn't bear out an effect of that, but if you read it through that lens, it starts to make a lot more sense for when someone would ask that question. It just seems to be a poor choice of terminological choice. Now, why do I say it that way? Because as I'm going through this literature, I'm starting to come to the realization that we as behavior analysts are incredibly technocratic. We are incredibly married to our verbiages, our terms. We're incredibly married to the notion of advocacy to the field, because I think disciplinarily and professionally, we've been so shit on by every other discipline out there in terms of our attempts to break through. We're kind of like that kid got picked on in high school and now is a total asshole to everybody, you know? And as a result, that's put us in a position to where you can't just burner the way that you think about stuff a little bit in terms of the hyper technical ways, and to be able to translate it in, number one, language that people understand, but number two, language that permit it to be applicable a little more loosely across other areas. So getting to the thing where you're talking about like politics and culture and that kind of thing, if you would conduct something like a cultural analysis of behavior, it would look nothing like conducting a functional analysis of an individual's human behavior, right? Because you have to talk about evaluating systems and behavioral dynamics and matching law, behavioral momentum theory. Like, you're talking about all these broad, more systems things. And the general rules are different for how reinforcers and MOs and incentives like alter the relationships between that stuff. And based on where we are, we don't have, number one, even baked into our own practices, the vernacular and the experience to be able to think at that an analytic level to make it possible. So then you have a lot of people, 37,000 of them, who think that they're qualified to do a whole bunch of shit, but actually they're really not, because they don't have the practical understanding and or the ability to synthesize the information and broadly utilize it across the board like that. So like, that's been seriously a thing that's been coming to me the last week, just in thinking in my own practice, and like, okay, maybe I want to go work in fucking foster care. Maybe I want to actually work in education. Maybe I do want to work on a political committee or something like that. Maybe I want to run for a school board. Fuck it. Like, let's go for the gold and like put my name on a ballot and gather 1,000 signatures and see if I can fucking make something. Like, you know, as you're thinking about these things, and it's like, well, I can't do, if I want to really accomplish those goals, I can't go in and do what I do on the podcast, which is go down a rabbit hole of hyper technical language that, you know what I mean? If you don't have a master's degree or a doctorate, you're not going to fucking understand. But number two, really isn't applicable broadly to those problems specifically. So I think we have a functional relationship problem in terms of the way that we think about what we do. And we have a conceptual problem in terms of like needing to loosen the reins on it. So those are the two things that I've personally identified in myself that I'm simply actively like reflecting on and trying to change, because I'm with you, dude. Like, something's got to give. I mean, we can't continue down the road that we've been on. It's not, aside from being soul crushing, because it's fucking soul crushing. Like, it's pointless. Like, it defeats the whole reason why helping people want to be helping people. Like, it's not actually maximizing the good that we could do.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
anyway, that's my soapbox.
Yeah,
Sorry. Conversation.
People are a product of their environment. Our behavior occurs because of the environment. If we are not changing the environment, what are we doing? We are trying to get people to act in opposition to the variables that are going to keep impacting them. That's almost an impossible task. There needs to be a combination of them. Like, we need to be able to become aware of and respond to our environment and, you know, gain some of that control and power in order to make some changes. So those skills definitely need to be taught, but we also need to change the environment. Like, we have to change the environment.
Rebecca, I agree. I think when we were speaking earlier this week about supervision and education. Like, we're not putting the contingencies and reinforcement in place that we need to reinforce these people to do anything other than sit there and bill until they die. That's all we're creating right now. So I think it's all connected.
So like if let's just say a behavioral revolution magically was able to happen by the end of this, what would that look like?
I mean, honestly, like I've been,
first of all,
yeah,
praise on that one.
I've been trying to think about it. Like, well, so we have all these technologies that are coming out, all of the peak, and now there's telepeak, and now there's, all these things where incredible gains can be made if, changes in education, changes in everything can be made if we are more effective and efficient at doing that. And we don't need every single behavior analyst that comes in the field to be going into autism services. So that's one. Let's get more efficient for the people who are going to continue in the field that way. Get more efficient with what you're doing. Get better at what you're doing so that, you are freeing up resources and time. And, like I said, I don't have the degrees. I don't have the experience. I don't have the whatever. I'm going to do my best to try to make that happen. I personally am going racking my brain and actively seeking how I can insert myself into these other things, because I do think it is important. But at the same time, we need people who are more experienced in the field and do have these broader experiences and perspectives to step up and start something too.
Well, I think one thing that I'd add there is I think this is a little bold if any of them are watching it, but I really fucking believe in this. I think that the ABIs, APBAs, PACBs created that kind of in and out culture, and the problem there, from whatever the fucking reason it was, caused this like, you're not accepted here. So for example, now this might be on both people, but the person trying to get in that system or not, but like, it's clear that we don't select for example, the right skill sets to be able to develop these organizations. It's like, are you part of this crowd or not? So I guess what I'm getting at is like, folks like from the Gold Diamond camp, that Gold Diamond was always arguing with other people. He didn't make friends. I think those things might have been his fault, not an ABI's, for example, but I know that him showing ABI was just a bunch of arguments, is what I've been told. And the issue is that nonlinear thinking is actually very well, a very good approach to be able to solve these sort of issues, right? And so if we have really complex tasks like automating or figuring out how to be more efficient in certain aspects and like what's working in the autism field now and post-COVID, that's the sort of people I'd be calling on, the Janet Twymans and the Joe Langs. But like, you're not accepted as like something in there. Like, like that culture does not accept that and like rely on that. And we even see that now day to day, like the cultural awareness conversations that we see going on. It's usually step the fuck back or realize the contingencies and things like that. And that's a cool step. But also what we should be doing as behavior analysts is relying on the skill sets to redesign the system in a way that would allow us to do that, regardless of who you are, what your skin is, what your, ethnicity, blah, blah, blah is. And so for me, it's like, I feel like the larger systems, whether intentional or not, are in a way to where they're not selecting for the skill sets we need to be able to live out the future that we want to see. And so for me, it's been, how do I pay attention to who has what skill sets, the big ones, the Langs, or whoever, right? People in ABI, there's fantastic skill sets there, wherever. And then I just kind of absorb those and run with them, because I don't think that anyone's coordinated enough or working together enough to be able to solve this. Like, that's just straight up how it is. We talked about this in a past episode, how ABI affiliate chapters were getting together, and APBA physically tried to stop that ABI meeting from happening because they thought they should be the ones getting people together. And that's the sort of shit where it's like, I just don't have faith in that these leaders can coordinate enough, right? This is why we saw This is why we saw ACBS split off 100%. This is why it's a separate entity, because people don't get along and they can't figure out how to select for the right contingencies and behavior.
And that's where I think Steve Hayes is, number one, a lyrical mother genius, Kanye West level style, as far as like what he's been able to pull off. But number two, a couple things. First of all, I agree that what you're describing is the ivory tower hierarchical structure infecting applied vocation. So taking an insulated perspective of people who don't actually, it's actually not based on competence, it's based on merit. And merit can be artificially cultivated through publication and slave grad labor. Okay. So you have this bizarro, like you just said, and I'm going to say it, cultural elitist crowd, because that's really what it is. I'm sorry.
You're doing this very well. I'm like
culturally
tired
elitist
as
crowd.
shit, so I'll preface that. So keep going. Thank you for making this sound
But I mean,
good.
that's what you're describing, right? You're describing a cultural elitist crowd that has created this in-out culture. And if you're, number one, in order to be part of the in team, you have to, number one, adopt the same values, the same beliefs. You have to capitulate. You have to be willing to be subservient for X amount of years until you're deemed worthy enough to ascend into the ranks.
And
right?
The issue
so like there's all these different things.
The issue is that we all come into this field and learn the values that we're talking about today of like, we want to fix the world or fix parts of the world and make the world better. And the problem is that those have just not quite been lined up. They've like slowly grown apart with a lot of the leadership organizations and rules.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing. Like, it's almost like this, it's almost like this organized gaslight, okay? Or like elitist cabal to initiate people into a mind frame of thinking.
And I feel like,
the system completely stable.
And I feel like
again, I know that sounds incredibly conspiratorial.
Well, yeah, is it purposeful?
I don't. That's where I would kind of pull a page from. Like, I don't think the government's organized enough to do. Like, I really don't.
Dude, I know that. I'm just saying those are what I'm describing are the natural consequences of just the way that these systems have been set up. That's the point I wanted to make is like that's I think what you're seeing. I don't necessarily. It's not coordinated. It's not all that stuff. But that's like the way those relationships have emerged. That's the type of structure that's emerged, right? Like, and that's if
cultural selection at work.
Yeah. So I mean, like, so then the question is, we as individuals, or we as people who disagree with that, like fundamentally disagree with that. And I'm actually going to pick apart something that you said, Rebecca, which is like, you said, I don't have the degrees. I don't have the this. I don't have the that. And like, what I'm going to say is that the beautiful thing about America is you don't fucking need them. Like, and what I'm starting to learn more is the most brilliant people I've ever met don't necessarily have those things, but what they have is the audacity to go out there and say what they have to say and preach what they have to preach and make the relationships they need to make in order to like produce a potential outcome and a result or organization or a business or some type of endeavor that gets them to the goals that they want. So like the biggest thing that I would say, and that's like the pulling out of the matrix or like the breaking of the chain, so to speak, that I think needs to happen is to stop being so attached to the idea that if the in crowd, everything I have to do has to be, I have to get the acceptance and or recognition of that in crowd. Fuck them. Like, you don't need that. Break the rules, refuse to participate in that process, bring them to you, and then choose your endeavor and pursue it. Because like and I keep thinking about all the great entrepreneurs, right? Elon Musk never finished college. I mean, and again, I know these people like Mark Zuckerberg never finished college. Bill Gates never finished college. Like, again, these people wouldn't necessarily be a no because they are very much our corporate overlords. But I mean, like in reality, though, like their achievements are because they said, fuck the systems, like on my own system. So, I mean, now the real question is, how do I actually do that? Dude, I mean, that's what separates the winners from the losers in our type of setup, right? It's like understanding, like, and figuring out a way to gamify that such as that it creates enough revenue and wealth to be self-perpetuating. And then it's like, you can do things with a conscience. And then you can make the actual choice to say, okay, do I sell out now or do I not? And I think a lot of people get to the point where they work their asses off and they eventually stop. And I can't fault them for it. I'm just saying that's what happens. What's up, Nicole?
I was going to say, me and Danielle are like entrepreneurs, I guess, because in Canada, we basically are self-employed. We did have the option to, like, you could go work for an agency, but I've been an entrepreneur since I was a child. So it's actually pretty fun to be able to, if that's where your heart goes and that, like, those ideas, it just gives you so much more freedom. I hire a business coach. Like, I have a business coach because I need it, because I don't know how to do this on my own. Yeah, it costs money, but I know that in the long run, it's going to be great. They don't know anything about behavior analysis, though, but they're going to coach me on how to do what I need to do.
That's a super good point, and something that I've always critiqued the systems for, and ABI, APBA, these other BCB even, is like our board of directors never have outside influence. And like, that was the number one thing I learned from being self-employed and entrepreneurship was like, you need to have multiple sources of influence happening all the time. Yeah. And so that's what I respect in some people within those systems, but like I know folks, to do some justice, I know people in the BACB have law degrees and they're going back for different credentialing things. Like there's effort there. I wonder if you could speed that up and increase that breadth. Like I would love to see people from Silicon Valley, different industries in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like talking about, like we say, oh, the field's never grown this fast, exponential growth. Uber was a complete disaster on the sense of how fast it grew, but it was also way more organized, I think, than what's going on. Like they like if you looked at that, there's definitely way faster growing trends that are out there that are totally separate, but I guarantee those people have insight in how to deal with stuff. Especially folks that quit and drop out of college and build rocket ships, like in car companies, and shoot their car with their rocket into space for marketing. Like, holy shit, we could take a page out of those people's books, right?
I like to get a lot of my like professional development outside of behavior analysis. My practice is from my supervisors, but I listen to podcasts and everything outside of the field for business, because they know, like, I don't think behavior analysts are super business savvy. Like we haven't really tackled that.
I need to work on my motivation for that, because I just way love to nerd out on behavior analysis, and I need to learn to nerd out beyond that.
I had to do like first professional development podcast, then behavior, and then I like paired it, and then I had like tracking. I was like, you must listen to at least one a week. And then I add more. Now I listen to them.
Yeah, Selena, you can just jump in.
That's almost all I listen to now. Occasionally, like Matt Scoria will be like, hey, did you see this episode? And I'm like, I'm sorry, man. Like, I love your shit, but I don't listen that much, you know? And it's just because, like, if I purposely choose to listen to those other things, there's a lot of stuff that I gather from and learn, and it impacts my practice, right?
And I usually apply behavior analysis to what they're talking about anyways. So then I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense, because it's behavior analytic. It's just in a different language, right?
All right, guys, we're going to go down a different rabbit hole here. Ready?
Yay. Yeah.
Love it. Through the looking glass we go.
Yep.
Jump on in, Alice.
All right. So we're going to just not ABA talk everything, but within the context of it. So you guys are all talking about really, really important areas of this, and I love it. But here's the big question. How did you guys all figure out how to do that? How did you guys all figure out how to reach out to a mentor? How did you figure out to connect with a business, entrepreneur? How did you figure that out to get that, to have that, like within? And this might get really
humility, bro, and self-awareness.
So like, right.
Contacting extinction in the system.
Figure that out.
It's
humility, self-awareness, and complete and utter disappointment. Like
extinction and variability.
And maybe even within your realm of what is replicated and shown within your experiences. So we're going to get into some cultural awareness too. So within like your area or like within your environment, you may have those examples set before you. Not everyone has those. So we're going to be.
I would challenge you to give me a specific example. Like, let's dive into that, because that usually stops the conversation. And let's dive into that.
You know what? Here, I'm gonna actually.
That's perfect.
I'm gonna push back on that and say this is that I actually, you're right. Not everyone does. I would argue that like 99% of people don't. I would argue that relative to circumstances, the people that we're talking about that actually do have those things readily available to them are people who have it regardless. But Joe Schmo Assel, who does what we do, with the exception of maybe 5% of us who like, and I don't know a lot of trust fund babies that do what we do, but I'm just saying, like, even though their cultural contexts are different, when it's all said and done, like there is a poverty of knowledge in terms of finances, in terms of business, in terms of like being able to function within a capitalist monetary system in such a way as you can generate wealth creation. Okay. Like I am a complete ignoramus on the topic. I'm a pretty well-read guy, I like to think, but I mean, like, that's an area that I'm a fucking idiot on. I've done a lot of reading on it because I want to learn, because I'm sick of fucking being poor. And I have friends who have
had those successes America. Like,
so I think what you're talking about, you're talking about also. There's various cultural influences, but I don't think I think that it's a false dichotomization to say that, like, just because like there's a lot. It's about have and have not a lot more than that. And I think that if you the kind of have not should be irrelevant. It's the fact that the not is there in your context, which is where that poverty of mind
and the reason I brought that up, Selena, is the reason I brought that up, Selena, is show me a functional relationship on an individual level, because that's as far as we can go with this conversation. It's important. I want to sidestep those sort of things. But the point there was like, show the functional relationship in your specific circumstance and like how that's happening, and figure out how to get around those, right? That's I really think all that you can do. That, and then also if you take the perspective of, I believe the stats somewhere around, if you're making $30,000 or more per year in the global sense of being a human and making that much, you are in the 1% of the world relative to everybody else's situation. And I think sometimes so it's a sliding scale in American specific conversations and other really well-off worlds and people, especially everybody in our field, this is an important topic. But also, if we want to take it in the larger context of the world, like, we're all in a pretty damn good spot. And sometimes I think where this comes down to is, when you're getting back to your original question of like, how did you all learn this? I think it comes down to, yes, there may be some things like you're discussing that impact it. And I might not even be aware of those and whatnot, but also I think a large part of this is, how do you realize what's going on in your life, what levers you can pull, and how to move forward, right? And that's the thing that the people outside of the field, like the Gary Vaynerchuks and stuff, would immediately stop a conversation like this, I'm pretty sure, and you'd be like, fuck that, you can't fix that, what can you do right now, right? And that sort of thinking is I think goes really well with what's the functional relationship, right?
Baby,
in your specific circumstance.
Right, and like so much of it, so like the questions that I am posing are not a projection of like current self, like life. Like I'm thinking of like others within other aspects of the field within ABA who we need to have support staff, and like so to have that. So then like how can we better help support them to have this team effort approach?
Yeah.
But then like,
yeah, well, I mean, because that's what I was saying. Like, I don't know what to do. I am searching for what to do, and I need a community. I wouldn't even be having this conversation if I hadn't come across Ryan O'Donnell and the Daily BA.
It's just,
and if I hadn't gone to, ABAI and Stephen Hayes and Tony Biglin and all them have a talk.
And I think some of it does come though, like you have to want it a little bit. Like it has to be fill. You have to have a hole in your heart where you're looking at certain things. I mean, I think that for me, like,
that's the motivation.
I'm only going to speak from my personal relationship, because from my personal experience, because I don't want to project I don't want to project generalizations based on what's happened to me, but I'm going to speak from my personal experience. And in my personal experience, it was, I've always had this extreme competitiveness. I've always had friends who I was competitive with. But then again, I also encountered devastating failure. I mean, like, there was that meme going around that like millennials now have experienced 2 massive recessions and blah, 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 but I mean, like that is fucking true. Like I graduated, and I'm sure I graduated in 2007, the year before the crash. I had 2 degrees. I studied. I was a well-read person. Like but the amount of poverty that I experienced that time really fucked my brain up and really put me in this position where it's like, number one, I became afraid of being jobless, which I think is why I'm experiencing so much like emotionality to this situation right now. And that like it's almost triggered this dramatic response in me where it's like, holy shit, I have a kid now and I can't fucking couch surf, and I can't take bus and have to walk to work and like only have $14, which means I need to buy some chicken and like cheese. I need to make a rack 5 days until I can fucking get food, or like, you know what I mean? Like, so like, I think part of it is like deciding that like, okay, I have one of 2 ways to go about this. I can let all that stuff completely devastate who I am, like, and just like turn me into this number one bitter person and or personal other stuff, or I can try to like make the changes that I need to make so that I don't feel those feelings anymore. So like the MOs are in place for me to engage in avoidant behavior of emotions. I mean, that's the reality of it. So, but that's where my motivation pushes me. And I don't think that, so I mean, so to want a little bit, like you have to desire that. That's the first step. The second step is, where do you find it? Dude, where do you find anything? right? You just look for it. And then eventually I mean, I think the other thing is that like, there's not a lot of enough patience out there. And I know it's like easy to talk about fucking patience because it feels like we've been patient our entire lives. But I think a lot of us have been patient our entire lives, waiting for some change agent to come along to lead us out of the cave, rather than just saying, fuck you, I'm going to walk out on my own volition, you know? I mean, because like a lot of people put their, you know, like Bernie or whatever, like pick your, you know, person where you're waiting for the revolution to come. And it's like, I think we need a much more like a personal revolution of searching if you want to find those things out. So like to someone who's saying like, I don't know where to start, the first place I would say, start with a Google search. And if you don't have access to the internet, which is actually, I can't believe this because I was talking to somebody who lives in a rural area, and actually it's becoming a mass problem with online learning. That's the way it's happened, where there's school districts right now putting
School buses.
hotspots on buses,
Yeah.
right? Hotspots on buses so that the kids can actually access the online learning options in their areas, you know, on the furnished devices.
Teachers don't have internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're giving phones for hotspots too, but not everybody lives in an area with cell service.
Exactly. So it's like this. So, I mean, like, then it's more about like, you know, and then I was reminded about again, I'm sorry I monopolize the conversation here, but I'm just, I'm like you, dude. Like you and I talked on Wednesday. I looked back on how I looked in the mirror, and I was probably pretty disheveled, and I fucking looked like a depressed mess. And I was an emotional mess at the time. Like I was reminded about something in my own life experience that like my grandfather woke up in Greece in the 70s to a military junta. There were armed military officers on the streets. The government had fallen, and a general was now running the country. He waited in line, finally got a visa, left a successful business in downtown Athens, which is like the property would be worth a lot of money. And he came to Youngstown, Ohio to be a bridge painter. Why did he do that? He did that because that was where the jobs were, you know? And he decided to change he moved to where the movement was, you know? And I think that's the other thing, is that a lot of us are afraid to just say, fuck it, and abandon wherever we are right now and get up and go.
Yeah.
Now and I think we might be having to have that conversation a lot more, where it's like, you know what, it might just be, again, like we're talking about, change your environment. Maybe the environment's broken. Maybe where you are is broken. Maybe it's not just you. Maybe it's not just your effort. Maybe the reality is your environment, and maybe the risk does have to happen. Now, you have to weigh out those options and that kind of thing, because I've also been in a position where I could have done that in the last couple of weeks, and it just wasn't right so far. So, I mean, that needs to be the mindset needs to be, I'm not going to just push a square peg through a circle. I might just say fucking roll, you know?
And that's kind of my hope for this conversation, actually, is that there can be some inspiration for people to, I really want people to appreciate and understand that, be aware and think about what actually does need to change in your life, and go out there and do it. And let's all go do it for ourselves. Like, let's all go do it. I mean, I cannot change the world by myself, but I'm going to do what I can. And I hope that other people go out and they actually really see the reality of the situation, go do things too.
And I think what I've gathered most from learning from other people outside of it is like, that realization of like, you have a lot more power than you think if you can just start figuring out where to gather your information, how to move forward, respond to the data to move forward. But more so that's amplified by money, unfortunately. And so the reason that the Musks
and that is something I do not have.
Well, and that's where I think that takes a lot of trial and error too. Like, I had not looked for it, but I accidentally started working in a place where fundraising turned out to be one of our things that we're trying to do for the nonprofit. There was a capital campaign of about $3.1 million that we needed for a building to house everybody in, so we can get out from a lease and own things. I had absolutely no role outside of one very small thing there. I guess two. First of all, I soaked in and absorbed and learned from some of the people in the conversations in the leadership team meetings and just tried to understand what the hell they were talking about. But also, I realized that like the right people with the right skill sets, but really the connections were what allowed that to happen. And so for me, it was realizing that money's out there. It's hard to find, but it was about how you pitch it and where you look for it. So like in Nevada specifically, this guy knew, he just happened to be I've talked about him before at some point. His name was Jimmy. I call him Milkman Jimmy because he was like the CEO or leader of our local chapter of Model Dairy or whatever the fuck it was. And his job was literally to deliver, like at the end of the day, make sure that milk was on everybody's doorstep when he was in that role. And so he got to know everybody. Way later down the road, he knew the people that owned the casinos and these other, just places that had absurd amount of cash. They were trying to write it off because they were part of the game and part of the system and things like that. But he's like, you know what? That's how the game works. I'm going to leverage it and we're going to raise this. Dude raised $3 million off of his personal relationships from the past as a result of that. It took him about 2.5 years. But for me, it was like, holy shit, there's money out there. Him and I would help him frame how to pitch what we were trying to do just simply off of like liberal or conservative values. So it was like, hey, we're here to try to make the world better and help these people with intellectual disabilities, these adults that are trying to develop job skills. But for us, that turned into, if you're a Democrat, usually the pitch was something of like, this is a job program, it's a welfare program, whatever, it's a social feel-good story. If it was conservative, it's like, hey man, there's a lot of people that are sucking resources. We're trying to figure out how to help them get jobs and become independent and get off this money. And I'm being very harsh and like that. And it was often, obviously a lot softer, but he would go to these pitches and be able to like succeed with weird requests. Like we had $50,000 donated for a token store for 150 people that are adults with intellectual disabilities. We had iPads, Kindles, low end, but we had those things as offers because of that. And it's because these people were looking to write off that cash to save a buck. They knew Jimmy and they're like, you know what, this sounds better than a lot of other places that were asking me for cash. So I guess it's like when y'all were talking about, when Selena was asking like, what do you do? Just through doing a bunch of random shit, I feel like it gets easier, but it requires doing a lot of random shit and throwing stuff on the wall, realizing it doesn't work, extinction, variability, like repeat. And where mentors come in that are really useful is they can help you sidestep those things sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Nicole, what is the number one thing that you've learned from your business coach?
To work on myself first and like to dig deep on where I'm coming from. It's a group of women. So, and they've been through this all and they've made businesses. So they can sidestep me and be like, okay, like maybe don't do this. Why don't you try this? Or just giving, more just making sure that I'm clear on what I want every time. So we have the hard conversations and I practice those with them. And then when I come to it, I know that that's the decision I want to make. And I think women do it differently than men. So that's why I chose this business coaching, but there's other ones out there. And I mean, social media is the best place to really get to know someone. And I have a lot of models in my life, like my sister, she's running her own business. And I was like, I can do that. So let's just, you just got to surround yourself with the people that you want, like, to give you that energy too, that you want to be like, and it gives you ideas and you just need modeling.
The biggest, hardest thing I learned about business is that there really is no rule book and everyone's just winging it. There is no like, this is how business works.
No.
As many degrees as there are in the field of business, not one of them can tell me what anything to do with
it's
like
not black and white.
Yeah.
No. And even like, it's like, yes, a business plan is good, but like, you got to take it day by day too and be like, okay, what are my goals? And come up with like some numbers and get really clear on that piece. And yeah, it's been great. And I'll like keep you guys posted on how things turn out. But I've seen the growth. I just have seen other people find business coaches who are like a soul fit and they just take off and they didn't really actually change too much. They just changed themselves.
I don't think enough of us in the field actually try to surround ourselves with those people that feed what we need. I think we just take a lot of shit sometimes and put up with people that just are sucking the life from us.
I'd say totally, or realize that it's gonna take a damn sacrifice sometimes. Like I think most of us experience that in grad school, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think some of us are really privileged to be able to sacrifice some of those things to be able to
yes, but also like most in this field, I think are choosing not to make those sacrifices.
A lot of people are, yes.
It's scary.
That's all. I would question that again on that individual level. I think for surely
Pretty
for some
scary,
people that's
man.
how it goes.
That's true.
Pretty scary.
It's a risk. It's a risk to take that leap. But if you trust in the people that surround you to support you, you can do it. You just need to have people who will be there when you fall, because you will. And that's okay.
I think my personal trepidation is finding actual people that you trust that opt not just in their own best interest, but in yours too. And
100%.
like finding like, and I think if we were asking like, where do I find people? I don't think it's where do you find people. I think it's how do you find those kind of people? Because those are a lot rarer than just people who can give you information and shit.
Yeah.
I think that's because they're treading the minefield between charlatans and or people who want to exploit the fuck out of you. Like that's been my experience. My experience is like, okay, like this sounds really good. I can't wait to do this. Oh my God, I'm so hyped. This is what I've been always looking for. And like being sold this dream or this idea or this thing that you're going to pursue. And then you do something for them. And the second you're not valuable anymore, the second you've already paid off, now you're unemployed. And
the one that I joined, like there's women in this group who have been there for 20 years. So I was like, okay, so this must be real. Like this is a thing. Yeah. So, and they wouldn't not be there still after that long.
But think about it. I mean, you acknowledge and you understand what you were seeing for longevity, the longevity of the group and the success of those women. We have people out there who can't make those discriminations. And
I can't make those discriminations. I'm a fucking I'm gullible as hell. Like for real. I'm a lay down was what they call in the sales business. Okay. I show up and like, I actually am like, that sounds like if it's logical, fucking dotted line, baby. And I'm like, and then retrospectively, I'm like, you're really smart, but fuck, man, you are super easy sell sometimes. Like you need to check. Only in the last 6 or 8 months and last year, based on some things that have happened, have I finally started to like take a breath and be a lot more selfish about those things.
Yes.
Because you have to be if you want to survive. You have to find the right balance, selfishness and not. Nikki, that's an excellent point. That's a great dude. It's so hard, especially when you're desperate.
Well, there's so much being sold on the internet too, right? As soon as you type in business coaching on Google, you're going to get targeted with as many business coaches, and you're like, which one's the good one? I personally, I always go through word of mouth with my close circle. So if someone's already done it and they said it was really good and I see the results, then I'm like, okay, then the money is probably worth it, even though it's tough sometimes. But yeah, being in business, right?
Yeah, I think finding people who can fill your weak areas is a critical, and that goes back to the self-awareness piece. It's like, okay, what am I really at? What am I honestly shit at? Or what do I just not know about? And say, okay, it's not a personal shortcoming to not know this thing. It's a reality of experience. So, I mean, how do I find someone who can fill this gap? That's legit.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people might be nervous about reaching out to other communities or other supports. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. And especially as some people have reached out to me about, hey, do you think it's okay if I reach out to like you and Dimitri and Ryan and the controversial exchange community? And people are like really nervous to do that. I've started reframing it of like, when I want to reach out to someone or if someone was reaching out to me, how open would I be to that? And that helps ease my anxiety for then taking the next step to send somebody a message. And the worst thing that can happen is they say no or they ignore me. Whoop-de-doo. Move on to the next one. Like
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
rejection is a thing that's you got to learn to accept rejection. If you work at a cold call job.
Yeah, I did that. So I'm like, oh,
Did
whatever,
you?
next.
And most
Dude,
people
I was a
that
car
are
salesman, and I don't know why in that context
Next.
I fucking crushed it, but in our context, I take it so personally, like it really fucking hurts my feelings, and
But
really
most
need to check
people
my
are going to
feelings.
accept your reach out in these fields because they want to share their knowledge. Like if someone reached out to one of us tomorrow to be like, hey, tell me about behavior analysis, which one of us wouldn't jump on top of that?
Of course.
Right? So.
Or like discuss what you're doing. Like, I just want to hear more. Sure.
Tell me about your thesis. Okay. Nikki, no.
No. Hashtag never again.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Is this our marvelous moment?
I think, I don't know. We can be done. I don't know. I'm like, this is like a super reflective conversation.
It feels like I'm not tired.
It's exhausting.
But we have the time.
Like I'm not tired yet.
to be reflective. So let's use the time.
Yeah.
right? Let's break out those critical thinking skills and look at ourselves and yay.
Yay.
If there's anyone out there who's like a good business person who actually like is hearing that wants to mentor people, reach out to us and we'll talk to you. And if you are really a good person, we will be happy to promote your situation.
If you're looking for someone, go online and search Gary Vee.
And at
And
low rates.
Everything Gary Vee's put out.
If you're someone that's out there that's doing work that you think is going to help change the world, call me. I want to help. I want to participate.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a community that's doing that. So
Yeah. There you go.
There's some good
I think
business
now
models
we're at our
coming up
model
now,
point.
which is good.
Are there?
I feel like some
That's
like
true.
other behavior analysts are coming up with some good business models. Ryan has a great one. I was looking at it, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much potential here. Like for other people to do similar things.
Just
Like, just to get
copying what I've
online.
seen on the internet.
That's right.
Literally.
It's just like
There's nothing-
diving down and learning about all these different things. And figuring that out. Yeah.
I would say, I told this to Selena behind the scenes. I hit back hard on those things that are around like, our circumstances, mainly because I think there's a lot of things that behavior analysts don't necessarily realize are now available and affordable to us. And so I feel like I've kind of lived that out. I'm sure there's been a few things that helped me along the way, but I've also completely folded one business and lost cash on. Like there's been failures in the past too, and things that kind of sucked along the way. And it's easier now because of those. And so when I watch the Gary V's and people like that, Gary Vee had one where he's like, you got to take the loss sometimes. Like your loss is your loss. You own it. No one else can judge you for it. You move forward. And so one of the businesses we started, gifted and talented stuff, ended up going down the tank. It was like, you know what? Like, this is where I'm at. That's when I first heard that. And I was like, this is what we do. We shut shit down. I pay off the debt that I owed on it. I walk away saying I learned something. I didn't go bankrupt. I just paid shit off and I said, fucking, we're done with this. I worked an extra year and a half to pay that off, but I'm done. Like I know not to do again, you know? And I don't know, that seems to be like at least a pathway forward in a personal situation. Whereas sometimes you just get stuck on not knowing how to move forward. And that's what's helped me. I don't know.
So here's one good question, and then we can wrap up. How do you overcome the fear, the very legitimate fear and anxiety of taking a leap like that if you do have a lot of risk? Because I mean, sometimes the risk is like, it's not just you having to end up on your parents' couch. It's I have a mortgage, I have a kid, I have a family, I have this, I have that. Like what about it? Like how do you overcome that fear? What is your suggestion of that?
Me specifically?
Yeah, man. Yeah, you're the one who's talking,
so
I love you so much.
Yeah, so this is where I think it gets exponentially harder the longer you wait or the more systems and things like that are around you. And so like I chose to purposely delay a few different things. Like I told myself that I wasn't going to think about my 401k, my future, my loans, things like that until I hit 30. And so I just like went heads down for those 10 years between 20 and 30 and like I essentially deferred those problems to later. So like I think I'm gonna have a different set of circumstances that may or may not be worse or better. I don't know. But like I think it just gets exponentially harder. So like you gotta decide like what you're gonna put your time into. And that's where I think it does get like the impact's gonna be way more. So like if you right now wanted to start up something like I was doing the last few years, Dimitri, exactly, like you would destroy more, like you would not have a social life at all. Like I had a very little one, but like I think that's the sort of things he's starting into. I don't know your life to that level, but I think that's what happens is you just got to sacrifice more and more and more. Or you're in a situation where your values say like I can't behave with both of these. Like values conflicts are super real and happen all the time. And that might be something where it's like I'm not going to do that because of this, right? This value. I don't know. I don't think I'm answering. I don't feel like I'm doing it justice.
It's just a cost benefit all the time. Like any decision you make related to those big things, if you're going to have a family, you're making other sacrifices. And if you're going to work on your career, you're making other sacrifices. And like, so taking a risk career wise, there's obviously going to be those costs that you just have to think about and have contingency plans.
Like, we both watch Gary Vee's stuff. We know that dude doesn't have a home life that are good for his kids. Like, he says it. I don't believe it, right? Like, he's not there for his kids like you are, right? For your kid, and like are gonna be. So I feel like there's literally only so much time, and so
well, and that's where I think like my plea to the field comes in, because I mean, you saw her pop in. I've got a child that I need to attend to, and I made commitments there, and I need to be responsible to that and honor that. And so I cannot necessarily go out and do some of these big sweeping drastic changes. I'm going to do what I can to balance that, but that is like, I can't sacrifice my daughter. So please, community out there, everybody do what you can. I am begging people to see the urgency of this and to make some changes and to not continue to participate in a system that's not working, and to evolve our approach to things so that there is a life for my daughter.
Yeah, I think the only thing that allows you to operate more efficiently and like in more value direction simultaneously is cash, unfortunately. Like, that's something I've seen from other people, and I don't know that necessarily from experience. I'm fucking rich. Just, I know that the more cash you have, the more you can move forward by watching all these people do those sort of things. It seems like a chicken and egg situation. I don't know.
Okay,
Dimitri,
great. That was super
did I do
depressing.
that any justice?
I would definitely recommend trying to find some people on social media, though, like other behavior analysts, because they are really doing some cool stuff, and I don't think it's costing them a lot of money to do it. They're just stepping out, like the Behavior Change Collective, like that couple. They're doing cool stuff, and I was like, holy crap, like that's so out of the box thinking. But they're just taking.
Is
that monetized?
Ty and his wife, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and they like monetize the online gym workouts for kids, and I know they had a business coach, but they stepped out of the box, and I was like, that's really cool. And behavior analysts can totally do this. More behavior analysts can do this. It's just kind of thinking, what else? How can we apply it? And how can we create businesses? And how can you create obviously you want to support your family, so you got to think about that too. But there's a lot of great examples out there.
Nikki said, how do we individually take the big risks? What big risks do you want to take? I don't know.
Yeah, so that was like so in order to answer this question, I need to ask questions. So
that's good. Ask them.
So who is the audience that we're looking to answer this to? Who is the we that we are answering it from? We as a human being, we as clinicians. You know, what is the risks? Is it risks to our career, risks to our life, risks to our overall decision making? What is the context in which this question is forming?
I mean, I always personally go, number one, I speak in terms of like the behavior analytic community and myself. And number two, I would say the risks are existential, like bankruptcy, loss of. Well, but I mean, if you're going to if you're going to talk about quitting a stable paycheck potentially, I mean, like you're talking about the reality and like not having capital to do that, then it ends up being like, okay, you're either going to have to leverage everything that you do own to the absolute nth degree, which means that you are saying, okay, I'm going to collateralize my life to make this dream possible. And if it fails, I accept the consequences. So then it becomes this risk benefit analysis on, is the potential fall worth potential upside, And I mean, I think in just asking that question, I think for myself, I think it is worth it. I just think it's about figuring out how do you go about doing that. And I think that goes circle back to what Nicole was talking about in terms of like filling your gaps and saying, okay, I have these X, Y, and Z skills, but I don't know how to monetize them. I don't know how to use them in some capacity. I don't know how to go about creating some type of system that can be wealth generating, that does that. That's where you have to find other people who can fill in those gaps.
I will gladly throw ideas at people anytime they want to talk about this, specifically in this group. Like, I feel like I'm starting to figure out a little bit of stuff, but also I'm glad to point to like where I consume things like that. And one of the conversations I sometimes come up with is like, or comes up is like I've been in this like obsessive consume as much as you can since I got into the field. And so it seems to compound and build over time. And you bring, you know, like the awesomeness of contextualism comes in with the business stuff that you learn. Like it just starts to like pay dividends over time. But
then you have to pause, and then you have to like absorb, and then you have to pause again.
yeah, kind of. Yeah. I don't know.
This needs to be a really gradual, slow roll.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like leverage the opportunities that you can. I don't know if this is where I do feel like I'm in a pretty lucky, privileged spot in the sense of like mental behavioral health. I've never been in a super tough spot, like some anxiety producing stuff for sure. And some like tough times in some ways, but like, I think I was super lucky in figuring out an ACT framework and the values model and kind of like being able to monitor and approach those things all the time because it just hit me in my life at the time when I was starting to feel those things, like pure coincidence and luck there. But like when I'm going on a run, like oftentimes I don't know what I'm gonna think about, but like I have some great thoughts and conversations with myself on those, you know, and like I'll listen to a podcast and it's like, wait, it has me thinking about this. So I'll switch over to music and I'll think about that. Like, I feel like it's also sometimes figuring out like where in your life, if you want to do this, you may be like inefficient in and where you can maybe get some more reflection time or whatever it is, you know? And I see a lot of people talk about this in the general health, fitness, business world, like, you know, work out, your health's first, it's most important. Like we all know this stuff. Like those things do seem to be also times where I can start to I feel like these things mesh over time, right? When I give to students in behavior analysis quite a bit is like, when you're first learning about the skills and principles or whatever it is, you know, like you could read about it and then you can walk away, or you can pick that thing up and you can start to think about like, how does this impact my life? Where is this impacting my relationships right now? How can I apply this tomorrow on my job? When I'm sitting in front of the kid and I'm teaching some sort of discrimination thing, can I start to tact and like restate what's going on here and put in behavioral terms? Like there's like this active part that I feel like my mentors helped me realize, like you can always actually be trying to apply this. And I think that can get really bad if you're not careful with it and you're just like obsessive and always on these things. And that's why I feel like I'm lucky. Like I don't feel like I'm dipping in that too much, but my support network also pulls me out and says like, hey, or fucking up pulls me out and says like, hey, you were too heavy in this and too hard on this, you know?
I've always thought you were a really good exemplar for applying all of the concepts to self-monitoring and self-recording and self-managing.
That was, I've said this before, it's like the most, that's like the coolest part about behavior analysis was the selfish component of it. I felt like, like I figured out how to start being happy and enjoy things.
Yes.
And that can get weird too. Like, but that was, I don't know. And I fuck things up all the time, but like, that's the beauty of this field, like self-help.
Error correction. Fix yourself.
Well, so, and you know, one of the in the slower, longer term, broader change of the world, like for me, it often comes back to education. And so if you're an educator out there, or if you're connected with educators, or if you're part of education, whether that be primary school, secondary school, postgraduate school, what are the behavioral repertoires that we could be teaching people to be more effective in the world? Can we please teach those instead of just shoving content down people's throats?
I definitely think that's
How much time do you have?
I was going to say that's a whole other episode.
I definitely think that's the sourse of the error and where you attribute and spend your time, though. I would
the
agree
next
with that.
generation.
Like if you had a linchpin, that's what you need to focus on.
I agree. Education.
Selena, do we and Nikki, does that what else comes to mind with the big risk question?
I was going to say, to kind of try and answer that question that was originally asked, I feel like that we have to ask ourselves, like as clinicians, one, is this a risk that you feel you can even take? Is this within your capability to take it? Do you feel that you can follow up on it? You know, within those risks, like it's a risk. That means things are going to go wrong. Things are going to go right. Like you have to be aware of that. And you have to be prepared to do that. And then there's just an immense amount of responsibility within that. So is it within your capability? Should you even be doing it? Let me think. I feel like I had
Someone want to talk that out with an example?
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I wrote out some other notes here really quick. I
really feel like a lot of that question is just that self-analysis piece where we're being honest again with ourselves and looking at ourselves and answering those questions, because there are definitely people out there, and I'm sure we all know them, who can't do that. They just can't.
Right. And like then becomes the acceptance component of like, it's okay. Like if you feel that you perhaps like the larger goal that you feel that you were trying to achieve within that risk, maybe you can't achieve that level of it, but just maybe break it down, pinpoint another one.
Or is it deferred, right? So like,
right.
I feel like I'm about to enter a chapter. This will be fun to look back on in 10 years, by the way. Like, I feel like I'm going to enter a chapter where I start to build a family, and there's going to be things that I want to do and I'm going to really struggle with. And it's going to be a fine struggle, personal fucking first world struggle, right? But it'll be one of those things where I think what I'm going to enter is a period where things I want to execute on largely get deferred outside of what I've already committed to. And I don't know from anybody else that's in circumstances there, but like I feel like what I see from the Gary V's and stuff is like, hey, now might be a time where you just like slow learn these things and wait for your opportunity and kind of do what you can until then.
Yeah, I think taking a step back and being humble is a big piece of the pie. You know, I mean, like, if I'm being totally honest, like,
or a team.
Man, this is like going to be straight up exposure time, but fuck it. Like, this is the level of crazy that is brain. Like, okay. For real, like, I've even thought about like, okay, how could I pay my bills but free up enough time to be able to do what I want to do? Well, I could do third shift custodial work because then I could just have my books on tape. I could just fucking mop some floors from like 6 to 3 or whatever, sleep till 8, have my kid when my wife's at work so we don't pay daycare, and then I fucking have my evenings to do my thing before my job again, and I don't have to be under the constant pressure and stress of crisis intervention, which fucking cooks me. Like, after 11 years of being in physical restraints and having large people with an exceptional amount of strength and uncontrollable rage beat the fuck out of me, like, it sticks to my soul a little bit when it happens now, so I can't quite do it as much. So I mean, like, how would I arrange particular conditions to where I could maintain the healthy mindset that I need while also the financial security? But like, that's, I mean, and I'm like a year and a half away from a doctor, and I'm thinking about scrubbing floors seems a lot more feasible at this point.
But you know,
so like, to make that dream possible. So I mean, like, now is that really going to be what I do? No, but am I like, is that definitely something that I've thought about? Yes, it's been in my head, like, for real.
That's like, how I started my business.
The kind
I
of
had
stuff
a second
that's been
skill.
going in my head.
Like, you're not going to make money in your business for the first year or two. And so if you don't have a bunch of savings, you have to have that contingency plan. And so I did gel nails for 8 years on the side, hustling while building my business on the side. And then as one started to overtake the other, I let the nails slide. I still have a couple clients because I enjoy the social aspect, but it's not the moneymaker. It's less than $10 an hour. It's not where my passion lies anymore, but it helped me get to where I needed to be, along with also being a daycare worker and a whole bunch of other jobs on top on the side while I built the behavior consultation business.
I used the BCBA roles to supplement essentially too. Yeah. And it was still fucking scary, risky.
Yeah. And it's
I had $2,000 in my bank account when I quit my job. It was stupid, but it also created that pressure and situation to work those 18-hour days for the 9 months I did or whatever, which was my choice and stupid in some frames, and like lucky in that I didn't have kids at that point too. But it was, that mechanism seems to be an important one of like, whatever it is, whether it's custodial stuff or not, like, how do you set up your situation to be able to give you enough resources and time to try it, right?
Selena, you had a skeptical look in your eye.
Sorry for all the thigh.
It may not have been skeptical. I think it just might have been of like a huge breath of air of just like those 18-hour days of just like long days, man. Like I know those, like, and I'm just, I'm just getting to a point where I'm just starting to like not have those long days, and I'm just like, oh, so this is what it's like to not have those.
Yeah. And this is what I'm talking about, of falling into the system and the contingencies around us. And we're all we've all been hustling and working hard and doing all these things. And we just want to make things comfortable for ourselves again.
Yeah, that life
And
doesn't work.
is that perpetuating the system? Or how can we do that and also make change in the world?
Yeah.
If everyone has something they want to read on this, I really enjoyed the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And the idea there is essentially, how do you learn the skills and then try to set up a system that kind of works for you and automates where you can. And it's not easy to execute, but I felt like it was a pathway forward for an individual person to be like, okay, if I want to impact the system, here's a way in which I can do that. The idea was wherever you can, automate. And those skills are easier to develop than you'd think. I don't know if that's going to fix your large scale social change in your system, but I feel like those sort of things are tools for the individual that's struggling right now, right?
And that's where, I think part of what I was getting at the beginning of this too was just building that community, building those connections and resources so that we're not just all out there struggling to try to make this happen individually on our own. Whatever, we need to come together. We need to help each other out. We need to participate together.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
TCE is their community now. Welcome.
Yeah.
We'll start it. This is how we do. We'll do it. We're doing it right now. This is how we do it. We talk about it. We commiserate. We cry a little bit. I mean, I've been crying. Ryan,
you cry a little bit.
Saturday self-help.
But I mean, I think that's how it happens. It slowly happens over like-minded people getting together, talking about that, and then eventually slowly but steadily creating that and building the momentum. Like I said, I don't know what this is going to be. A bunch of people wanted to have a work group on Sunday to talk about that supervisory stuff. That's fucking cool. That, awesome. Let's do that. Is it make money? Absolutely not. But I mean, is it worth the time to sit down and say, hey, is it a thing that people can chunk out together, work on, and then maybe in 5 years, it's something that's substantive and valid and actually provides the value that everybody wants, whatever. I don't even know. And I don't even know what the hell we're going to talk about. I just think that that's how some of these things happen and start over time. If you don't have capital to just go out and blow, it's got to be about relationship building, and it's got to be that slow, steady burn.
Right. That's how you collect those people, right? Is by doing those things that you guys are going to do and figuring out who is that person in that group who maybe there is one, maybe there isn't, who can fill those gaps that you have in yourself.
We ran a group called Brohavior for 4 years. Anyone ever hear about Brohavior? I deleted all that shit a while ago.
Just because I loved the name.
So what we did is there was a bunch of pissed off, upset people that didn't see really similar MOs here of the field's messed up. We all want to chase these really big dreams. What can we do about it? Part of it also was that our mentorship lab and mentorship community at Florida Tech was going to go away because we were all graduating. And so we all got online on a Sunday to kind of talk things out. We stayed up all night. We talked about issues like this from a Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern until I put my boots on and went to work the next day. And we realized that there was a lot of people that needed each other because they weren't getting it in the supervision or in the practicum or whatever it was. What that turned into was just this kind of weekly self-help group for a couple hours. We just talked about anything that interested us, and behavior was all over the place. And someone jokingly called it broing out, and they're like, oh, it's like brohavior. And then everyone that was on the call was like, this is funny. And there was a formal vote. It grew to just a referral-based group of people to about 30 people. And we formalized it, got a domain, we blogged, we did some shit like that. There's some stuff on B-Side 21 that you can find. This still has brohavior.org affiliations kind of on there. But for the most part, what we did is we realized how to work as an online community, but also we realized some of the skill sets and things that would not let that community prosper. So there's some things on the philosophical discussions and getting leaning more into people. So what reminded me of it totally was when Selena and you were bringing that up, and I was kind of leaning back into you. We're leaning on things that we personally stand on different sides of the spectrum on a little bit on this topic, right? We also learned how if you're not careful on those, you can completely burn relationships and tarnish things. So there was also this about half the people that got into it didn't like it. About half the people that got into it loved it because we were selecting really we were allowing for really argumentative things to be presented, as long as they were rooted in behavior analysis. So it was actually really productive to develop skill sets, but it was one of those things that was personally hard to take, because someone might challenge you on your reasoning or logic, or call you out on your bullshit, basically. But what came from that was the Why We Do What We Do podcast, still fucking cranking. There was a number of other things that we developed, including some like cool procedures to try to off of pro-sociality and things like that when they launched that platform, to try to get everybody going. And we realized really quickly we needed to be more pro-social and like focus more on that side of things. And for the most part, it just died out because of not putting all the attention into the, like, managing the community side. And I think that was the one thing that we learned, is like, as quickly as you can figure out how to support a community manager and give them the values, goals, directions of what to manage by, but not have it as a community thing, then you don't get that group having to throw in an hour here or there, but like you have somebody that's dedicated for that. And so like what I'm trying to do with the on location stuff right now is I would love to not to get that to a point where I paid somebody to monitor the community, manage those sort of things. And I don't give a shit about $1 if I can. I just want to be able to make the next video and like keep that thing going. And that was the thing that I really learned from there. I guess we realized also behavior. We were talking about, so it was like, this does not justify the name, be clear there. But there was, I think it was about 75 to 85% women that were in part of it. And we got hit with these sexist things online, blah, 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 because of behavior. And what was funny is we had a lot of cool presentations, ABI and stuff. One year we did 27 presentations. Like we were trying to fucking take the world over by behavioral revolution in that sort of sense. And it was just a bunch of punk kids, but we always had someone like Joe Lang and these people on the fringe that would moderate our panels and make sure that we were like staying within the realms a little bit, or call us on our bullshit at least. And we're never like unprofessional in that sense. But like the name ended up changing to BX Plus, and the idea there was it's behavior analysis and something else. Like you should always be pairing our way of thinking and our philosophy with some other area, whether it's entrepreneurship or whatever. And so I've always wanted to like rekindle that. This has a lot of those feelings of it. More so, there's some cool lessons learned. So maybe if we continue next week, I can just share 10 or 15 minutes of some of the things that we made and things that we learned and things I'd never do again. Because it is so clear that is missing from our organizations and our culture right now. The problem that we ran into was so many people want to go so many different ways that required like quite a mentorship community to be able to like pull that off. Like I would not be comfortable mentoring people in nonlinear contingency analysis that Joe talks about. I love it. I feel somewhat fluent in it, but not near enough to mentor the next person, right? So we realized that we needed these like mentors on the outside that were dedicating quite a bit of time to be able to do that. So I think the way you move forward with those sort of things is figuring out the monetization side. And I don't think that's super hard. Like you could have a membership-based organization that's been shown. It's worked on the Daily BA somewhat. It's worked in ABI and stuff. But you also need to figure out how you could efficiently leverage people as mentors and connecting with the right people. I think the number one thing that the Jim Carrs, the Pat Frymans run into all the time is that they don't know who to spend their time with, and they have demands for that. So like if I could figure out a behavioral way to be like, yo, here's Jim, your next 10 people that are likely to be the BCBA, like wannabe gurus and like want to get into your system, right? I think you'd be stoked. And if you could figure that out, right? I think you run with solving people's problems that you're talking about now, but turn it into an entity that helps the field, but has enough resources monetarily to kind of like survive and prosper. I've thought about this forever.
Like behavior analyst, guidance counselor / staffing agency.
That's like what we were doing in behavior in BX Plus. Like there's a number of people that it was like a group support mentorship based on your skill sets, your passions, right? And like conquering things together.
And you know bigwigs outside of academia who want to do that mentorship?
Do I?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's going to just be, so what happened with Next Gen when we did those couple Next Gen summits and things was I was like, hey, this is cool, but like it's capital intensive. We're really paying a lot of the cash at the end of the day to people that own the space and things like that. So it's kind of a stupid model. I really fucking think it's a stupid model for where the money's going. It goes into hotel rooms and event space is where the majority of all cash goes, or it goes into gas, fuel, transportation, whatever it is. That's like, I think 60% of like what the conferences were going into when we looked at where all the dollars go at the end of the day. And so I think what we learned from that was like, oh, could we rethink like an online community? This is where Megan Miller and I talked over the last few years about this stuff. Where partially this is why Daily BA and like the on location stuff's online influence, but it's also I think why you see Megan Miller going super heavy online is because we're having those conversations, kind of both experiencing those contingencies of working your ass off for 60 grand events. You pocket $3,000 for 6 months of work, you pay it off. So, you know what I mean? Like you made people happy, CUs, blah, blah, blah. Like it's just not working. And so, next gen, what I did is we had a lineup scheduled ready. Some of those people like Janet Twyman, Joe Lang, and some others on the fringe, and told them, like, hey, I realize this model is really inefficient. And like, would you support us canceling this, rethinking things and coming back at a future date? That's totally undetermined. I still haven't hit him up on that. And that's been 18 months ago, almost 24 months since I hit him up on the initial request. Right. And so they were super in support of that. But I guess some behind the scenes is like why I stopped putting effort into those models. You miss a lot because those are super important to bring people together. But like, it was not the defining way to do it is what we realized, or assume now is a better way to put it. So I think what it would come down to now like answer your question directly is, can you demonstrate to those people that you have enough of it kind of thought out and planned and organized to where it's worth their risk of time? I don't know what that is specifically, but like, I think those sort of people will recognize the hard work and they'll give it a chance. And someone mentioned this earlier, people want to help, right? And things like that. And these people want to help. It's just, can you create an enticing enough of offer? So if I came back to it, Joe was a part of Brohavior and BX Plus and always on the fringe, kind of giving us feedback in the back in those communities. And so someone like him, I think, is down. It's, are you making it enticing enough for him, right? So is there enough behavior to shape, I think, is the goal there. And as long as we gave him behavior to shape, he was involved, right?
I would love to meet Joe.
You're close to him. Don't you live near Seattle?
Yeah, but I mean,
you just fucking hit him up. Be like, yo, I want to come to Seattle and talk with you.
yeah, okay.
Read a lot. I'm serious. Sorry, I don't know if that answers your question. I've had a couple different rants on this stuff, but the 100%.
I feel like for the recording for this ended like a while ago because you're gonna have to cut this out just for like IP purposes. Like Ryan, yes. Like I know you just like
I'm not actually building it.
Finish his whole documentary, but like honestly, that's a really good idea. Like don't like put this out there. Like no, like.
I don't give a shit. Someone could build it.
You should give a crap. Like this is really good. Like
I have a very
do that.
I have a very small MVP, like minimal viable product, that I'm gonna try to test with Pat on location. We'll see. I've got plans on how to integrate this into shit that I'm doing. Never do something if you don't have at least 2 reasons. That's one of my reasons with this, is like to see if I could bring that aspect in. If I can get the non-tech person of Pat to engage consistently on that platform and figure these sort of things out, then I think I'll have a pretty cool concept to bring back and show other people. But like, I think that whatever you build, like that's like, I guess part of the reason to share is also there's just not enough, like there's so many domains in which people want to try to branch and bring stuff into that we need a lot of people trying a lot of shit. And we all need to learn from each other. So like another complete mock system of this, whatever that is, a do better, your own thing, you make whatever, like that's how we're going to get there. Like more breadth of people trying to build these things out. So fucking build something, Selena.
Well, Like, yes, I'm reaching out to like a lot of people. Like, like yes, there's like, yeah, like I had this whole year plan, guys, like of different things that I was gonna do, and yeah, COVID-19 happened, and I'm not going anywhere now. But
Never
thank God for technology, and I'm still being able to like reach out to people and like
the COVID thing fucking sucks. I hate it. I'm not even directly impacted with a loved one or anything, capturing it myself, things like that, and it sucks. It'll be atrocious if that happens. When that happens, I don't know. But the thing I think that like a silver lining for many of us right now is like, I think we're going to realize how to do, like, this whatever, however big or deep our scar is, like, we're going to carry it with us in this, right? So there's something to learn from this from each of us, I think. And so when you brought that up, Selena, saying like all of it was wrecked, learning how to move forward with your idea in the wake of wreckedness is going to be a valuable skill set. And it's going to be something that helps build your quote perseverance, or your very, you know what I mean? Your very responding or whatever, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's just how I self-talk to myself in these situations, but I'm like, fuck, everything's wrecked. I will figure out some new things, and maybe it'll make me better in the long run. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I totally agree. But like with things are like not going well at all right now. But like within that, like I am 100% like reevaluating so much of like what I'm doing within the clinical sense, and I'm just like, gotta figure out how to redo that assessment, redo those session notes, redo that behavior plan. And I'm just like, this opportunity right now, like Selena 15.0 is happening. Like this is just gotta happen. Like I like everything that I've absorbed and learned, like here we go, like moving forward, like for the best care of the clients that I work with. Like that's the point. That's the goal, isn't it? Like this is what we're all doing this for. Like hopefully, please, someone tell me that's what they're doing.
I mean, people centricity is kind of the goal. That's kind of this is nice. This might actually bring us to an ending point. But I mean, full circle, it's really, that's what it's about. I mean, service is our job. I mean, and no matter what capacity we're doing it, even if we do expand into the political, the climatological, whatever it is, I mean, when it boils down to it, you really can't do something that's socially significant if it's not done in service to others. Like if it's completely self-serving and it's completely, if it's completely monodirectional in that way, it doesn't provide the value that it needs. And like, that is how you do it. So like, I think to kind of like close out what Ryan was saying is that like, where the daily BA finds value, where like all the different projects that he does finds value, where labor finds value, is that like, and that's what community building is. It's bringing value to people. And then as you bring value to something, people want to engage with it. And the more that they engage with it, the more time you get from them. And honestly, the only commodity that matters in life is time. I mean, because that's the only thing that's actually finite. We all live, all die. So I mean, like, where you allocate your time, it's a precious choice that you make. And like, if you can bring something about that generates enough value to get people to engage their time in it, then you're really doing something social significant, no matter what it may be. So I think that's where I would say, like, where are you bringing the value, and where do you want that value to become, and how are you doing that in terms of service to others? So yeah, I'm with you. And I think that's the existential question that we're all asking ourselves, because I think that what really motivates Rebecca's question is that, like, where's the value, man? Like, I'm told that I bring this value. I'm told that I bring the socially significant thing. I'm told I do all these effective things. I'm told. I see micro progress, but like, am I really bringing the value that I have perceptively been told, and what I'm deluding myself into thinking I've been doing? Like, am I really bringing the level of change that I want to see in the world in the scope and range that I really could be? Am I maximizing those efforts? Right. So I mean, like, those are the questions that we're all asking ourselves, and how to get there. So I think the discussion's been amazing as far as that goes. I love not having things, like, I love not having a topic. This is so awesome. So thank you guys. This is marvelous today.
Definitely been looking forward to this conversation. So
this one went all over the place. I'm glad to throw this up there for others to listen to, but if we like went too far down the rabbit hole, we can cut it early too. anyone's thoughts on like, I don't want this out there?
I don't give a shit. Whatever.
I'm okay with whatever.
Okay. I really think if anything, this is something that may find us a few more people, to be honest, that are kind of feeling this. I could see this going in a way in which we potentially, I mean, we can follow and see what, especially if you all have ideas, but I think we could potentially start doing this as like, let's kick off, do some stuff, and then maybe see if we hit stop, and then we finish figuring out how to fucking take this forward as a group and helping each other, you know? I don't know. That's my thoughts.
Honestly, I want to put this out there. Like, and I know Becca, like the first time we met was not productive, but like, I'm in a place in time where I need to make some changes to find fulfillment in the world and the life I want to have. Like, I've had that moment, and like, I thought going back and getting a doctorate was going to do that for me. And all it's really done is generate a lot more doubt and questioning in terms of the people who I have held in high pedestals for a long time. So it's almost like crumbled my perception in terms of like who is capable of doing this. But then the positive thing that has come from that is that it makes me think that maybe I or some normal person actually can do it. Like, it doesn't require that hyper specialized skill set that everybody likes to tell you have to have, because if they create a sense of mystery and aura about a thing, it intimidates people from wanting to go to it. So like that's what I would say. So like that, but engage. You guys are awesome in engaging the community coming onto this. Like, let's fucking do it, man, for real. Like, this is how we can do it. Like, this is our group. This isn't just my group. This is all of our groups. Like, fuck it. Let's bring people into the fold. Let's do it.
And maybe we can start making some committed actions and hold each other accountable to start making those moves.
That's what we used to end every behavior meeting with, was what were you going to do the next week?
Yeah.
This is beautiful.
Well, I mean, I'll
find one of the original
at least
links.
one. I'm going to do at least one upload a week, Ryan. That's my commitment to you. At least one upload a week or a day. This for the rest of the week.
Oh shit. Okay. I was going to say, dude, you've been doing more than that. I don't feel like you should be taking a step back.
At least one upload a day per week. I've been behind on that. I will give it to you. Because I really want to finish Science Human Behavior now, because I actually want to read Man's Search for Meaning. So it's like, I actually have incentive to sit down and trudge through that fucking opera.
I'm really committing to uploading this because I've done too much. I will commit to something bigger next week. I want to send each of you real quick in the chat a link to one of our early behavior meetings that is online but not public. So you guys can watch and see what I was talking about if you care to.
Dude, this is a fucking bruiser, bro.
Oh, I wonder if I deleted it.
Oh man.
Dude, I've been listening to so much.
Next,
yeah.
I would fucking go blind. Oh man.
There it is. Behavior side.
All right, I might
chat.
do. Man's Search for Meaning is little.
Oh my god.
And it's also an easy read. I might do this after Science Human Behavior for some candy, but I'll tell you what, I'll do this one after. Because like I really like
that book. I haven't read it yet. I've just been listening to all his stuff. Like I found his lectures, and then I started seeing some of his other talks, and I'm like, oh my god, why is this not like a core part of literally everybody's education?
Dude, I listened to this and then I was like, nope, got to get the hardcover or got to get the actual book. I cannot listen to the information in this book. It's not going to stick at all.
So when we first recorded this, we had permission from everybody to share this, but we since just were like, oh, it's old. It's out of context. So don't share this publicly, please. We've got the rights to, but like, I don't know what the fuck was said.
You don't know what was said?
This was 7 years ago, April 7th, 2013.
Okay,
this is one of the original behavior talks.
Did you stop recording?
No, not yet. I can edit. I've got the power of editing. But yeah, there might be, I haven't looked at this forever. You'll see Baby Scott. He's the one that runs the podcast. What we do.
Baby Scott.
You'll see Cameron. Everyone's doing super cool shit in here too.
That's Stu.
Stu's probably in it.
Your behavior side chat. Nice.
Yeah, dude, when you did the fireside chat and you like talked about it when you started reading, I was like, dude, this is like, there's so many parallels.
Hey man.
I have
maybe
no
it was
clue.
Maybe it was just too early. Maybe now's the time.
The model was close. Is it playing for y'all?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, paused it.
Is that baby Shane?
No, the Shane's not in here. Shane did find us though. So we found Shane through there. We found there's a few people in here. Anita, Kyle, and Michael. Everyone's doing cool stuff. And like it served a function for them. And it might have been a short-term, week-long thing where it's like, yeah, fuck these guys. I'm like contextualist and I like this mechanistic thinking. We used to fight with anybody that thought very mechanistic. Or it might have been something that really shaped and defined someone a little bit. This isn't like a super old good. This is an old one. This is actually too early. This was like before it got good. I don't know. Someone wants to laugh. I'm sure there's some laughs in there. Bunch of lost practitioners.